I'll let the rest of you need to shuffle out if you need to shuffle out, otherwise I'm going to get this party started. All right. As usual, my Twitter is up there so you can yell at me in real time. Let's start this off with a story. So, several years ago, right before Christmas, it was observed that some of our customer accounts were no longer seeing data. At this time, we were a smaller private company, and all of engineering and support existed on one floor, so engineering headed over to support and said, hey, we noticed some of our customers aren't seeing data. We're going to fix that. Why don't you reach out to the customers and tell them what's up? And support said, sure. Even though support had no idea how to figure out exactly who was impacted and then what to even say to these people when they did find them. But they said sure anyway. And then engineering said awesome and walked back to their desks and worked on a fix. And we did fix it, and we got the data recovered. But it took us 3 days right before Christmas. And it wasn't the fix that held us up. It was things like, who should fix it? Should we bring them in the weekend before Christmas? Who should we talk to about this? How long should people be working? And of course, the most important question, who should be ordering pizza? 3 days. We realized something had to change. So we rolled out the incident commander process. I'm Alice. I'm an SRE at New Relic. I also helped roll out the incident command system after that 3-day festival of lights. And at this point, I'm one of our most experienced ICs. And I'm pretty excited to share all this stuff with you. New Relic, for those of you who don't know, is an application performance management and software analytics company. We have a pretty interesting stack these days with Docker, Cassandra, Kafka, and our infrastructure is always becoming more and more complex. And if you don't have the right people processes in place, an incident can just throw you completely off the grid if you don't know who to talk to when. So, by show of hands, does any of this sound familiar? Things break, yeah, and you're plagued by issues such as figuring out who's going to fix it, figuring out how to tell customers if they're impacted, figuring out how much you personally care in general because you don't know what the scope of the problem is. Or, if you're a casual observer, looking on and going, what the hell? So you can later bring what you learned there into your own stack. If the problem is you can't focus on the technology, everyone is just up in the air trying to figure out the process, things take much longer to fix. And that's why we have this incident command system. Like any good postmortem, we're going to cover the who, what, where, when, why, and how of it. You know, who's going to be doing this? When should you roll it out? How should you go about it? But since I have about 20 minutes, it's going to be a little smushed. But we're all professionals. I'm sure we can figure it out. So let's dive right into it. What is the incident command system? Well, it's nothing new. In fact, it came about in 1968 with fire chiefs in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to coordinate how to combat wildfires. And since then, it's been adopted as the major command structure for fires, crime scenes, and any sort of major incident. In fact, in 2004, Homeland Security rolled it out as the National Incident Management System, and it's actually required for use if you want to receive federal aid. So at this point, anyone with a military or emergency response background should be familiar with what I'm going to be talking about. Now, in the military or government level, they have a pretty complex structure, with the incident commander at top and filtering down to support structures with safety and logistics and operations. But for our needs, we're using a more simpler model, with the incident commander at top, and then the technical lead and the communications lead. We're going to dig into those right now. So what is the incident commander? What does the incident commander do? Well, it may shock you to find out that the incident commander commands the incident. Now that's important. These are separate roles. The incident commander does not fix the problem. In fact, if the incident commander is the person best qualified to fix the problem, they should not be the IC, they should hand that off to someone else, and they should be the technical lead. It's really important that these roles stay separate and everyone stays in their lane and doesn't try to step on each other's toes. Just focus on what you need to do and everything else will work in harmony. So the incident commander is a trained volunteer, which we'll get to in a bit, and they keep a pulse on the entire effort, coordinating things between the technical leads and the communications lead, and they handle the internal communication of the entire effort. Now, the technical leads are probably the position that you're most familiar with. These are your domain experts that are actually fixing the problem. Whether it's the engineer that actually deployed the bad code, or maybe a more senior engineer depending on the scope of the issue, or perhaps whoever got paged, because in New Relic we put devs on call for their own code. The tech leads working on it have a couple of jobs besides fixing the problem. They need to communicate what they're doing to the incident commander and give them updates on their progress. And they also need to run impactful changes by the IC, because if I'm the IC and we're troubleshooting an issue and I'm watching you troubleshoot it, but then the network goes down, I need to know that that's because of a change you just made and not because of some whole new cornucopia of bad times. You got to keep the IC in the loop. Last but not least, we have the communications lead. Now, while the IC handles internal communications, the communications lead handles external communications. They are your bridge to the public and to your external stakeholders. And that bridge goes both ways. On one hand, they're the people crafting those lovely, consumable status page messages. On the other hand, the communications lead is saying, yo, I see 500 people on Twitter are talking about this. Maybe the scope is a little bit bigger than we thought. It's really good to have that bridge going so you understand the impact of what you're doing onto your external customers. So the communications lead. So in addition to those three roles, the incident commander, the tech lead, and the communications lead, the other part that you need to actually use this system is severity levels. Now, these are used to get a quick idea of the scope of the incident so you can judge the impact and the rate of your response. The actual specifics of them will be determined by your infrastructure, but I've summed them up here for general use. So level 5 would be everything is okay for now. Maybe you need to do maintenance on a production system. Nothing's broken, but hey, you're going to touch it. So you should probably declare that you're doing something within the Sev 5 realm, but everything's totally cool. Now a Sev 4 is, a thing is smoldering. I see some smoke. A Sev 3 would be, a part of a thing exploded. Perhaps if this was a building, that thing would be the bathroom. A small room, but necessary. A level 2 is one whole thing exploded, maybe an entire floor. That's probably going to impact other things. You should get eyes on that problem. Which of course leaves a Sev 1, everything exploded. That's what you really care about. That's all hands on deck. And when you reach a Sev 1, you unlock bonus roles. The emergency commander is the liaison between the incident commander and the rest of the internal company stakeholders, such as marketing and legal. Incident commander is heads down on a technical fix. The emergency commander is up top, talking to everyone else and figuring out the means of response there. The logistics lead reports up to the incident commander, and they handle logistics, such as ordering pizza, figuring out shifts, and sending people home. If a Sev 1 breaks out, logistics lead comes on and says, okay, you from these teams, go home right now. Because if this takes hours and hours of time, I want a clean handoff. So, extra roles. Now at this point you might be saying to yourself, why? Why do this? Why roll out this really ridiculous system? It seems difficult. And after all, I got this. I understand my system. I know when things break, who to bug, and I know everyone. I keep them all in one room. I don't like this at all. And I don't even like being associated with the military. That makes me feel uncomfortable. Well, don't worry, you're going to look at sheet pictures now. So, yes, right now, you might understand your infrastructure. Perhaps it's a small, monolithic app with one database, and all of you fit in one room and you know who to talk to. But eventually, hopefully, your infrastructure will grow, become distributed. And as things grow and things break and you don't have people processes, it means everything is all over the place. And some of you might already be at this point, and that's why you're at this talk. And the thing is, when you get a large infrastructure and you don't have good process in place and things break, people pause. They get confused. They panic. They don't know what to do with what should be an obvious situation, and that wastes time. And when they do try to fix it, they do things a little bit wrong. They're disorganized. They may double up on tasks when that's not necessary. Or you might have the wrong person trying to fix the wrong problem. And at the end of the day, what you want is a unified, organized effort with all of your teams working in harmony. So why use the incident command system? Well, it provides calm and internal communication and a process so everyone knows what they're doing. Because when it comes to resolution efforts, you want to be able to focus on what's important, which is your technology. The middle of an incident is the worst time to figure out who's doing what when. That wastes time and effort. You want to know exactly what needs to go into place so you can focus on a fix. So if I've convinced you, you might be wondering, all right, Goldfuss, how? How do I roll out this stupid system? Well, one of the main cornerstones of our approach was training, and most importantly, train everyone. And you might be thinking like, whoa, train everyone? Train the new people? Like, I don't want them coming in here after a week in my company and being in charge of fixing it. I don't want them being an incident commander. Can't we just hold off on this? Well, all right, let's think about that for a minute. Training everyone off the bat means that instantly you're telling them you trust them to make the right decision. I mean, you hired them after all. Hopefully they're an intelligent, responsible person. It also means that if they have that training in place, they can watch other incidents unfold and the patterns that come out of that, and they can apply that to the training they've already received, and they understand how to make it better and how it actually flows. And through experience, we found that people don't IC unless they're actually comfortable ICing. You're not just going to have someone jump in and be like, I'm a Ruby dev, went to a boot camp, network partition, I'm on it. It's not going to happen. In fact, if anything, you might have to kind of push them towards it. Be like, hey, you're a leader. You've been here for 2 years. You should totally IC it so people can, be responsible and look up to you on that. So again, train everyone. In addition to that, you should train them often, offer refreshers, but also coordinate your sessions. Now, a tech lead role is going to change depending on what technology broke. It's difficult to provide specific training for that. But the incident commander and communications leads have pretty set roles of processes between the two of them. So you should make sure that you coordinate your training sessions between those two roles. So the incident commander knows what to expect from the communications lead, and the communication lead knows what to expect from the incident commander because they're going to be communicating in a very set way. So make sure that the information there is the same and coordinated. And in these trainings, it's always good to do a bit of role play, even though it's never as good as the real thing. Incidents are way different than what it's going to be like in the training room, but it's always good to kind of have that minute response when you're talking to people like, okay, this broke, what are you going to do now? Okay, have a status, what are you going to do now? Just to sort of prepare them for the actual war room experience. Now, of course, when rolling out a new process, no good DevOps shop would be incomplete without oddly specific tooling. One of the main tools we've relied on is the HueBot project, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a GitHub project with an MIT license, which means you can do whatever you want with it, although beware, it is CoffeeScript. We did a fork internally, and we've used it to keep track of incidents. And I got together with a couple of my colleagues and went through the motions of a very common scenario, and I broke it down for you in the next couple of slides. I know there's a lot to read. I'm going to read it all out to you, and we're going to see how the roles interact and how they interact with this bot for a very common scenario. So the first thing that happens when I'm incident commander is I come in and I declare that there is an incident with the command nrrd 911 IC me. So all of a sudden, the talk title makes a lot more sense. The bot comes in and says, hey, Alice started something. Alice, here's a couple of things you might need. And then I set a status for what the incident is, which is, of course, zombies are attacking the data center. Very common. Setting the status, by the way, allows casual observers to come in, and there's a command they can also run on the bot to spit out what's actually going on. It means you, as the IC, get interrupted a lot less. So setting statuses is good. Now my colleague Jason comes in, and he has the access to the data center and domain knowledge of how to fix it, so he takes the tech lead. And the first thing I do as IC is ask him to go get a status on our shotgun supplies like you're going to do. Then comes Yoni, who takes communications lead. And again, the bot spits out some interesting stuff for him to digest. And Yoni immediately pings me as the IC and says, hey, is this going to impact customers? And I say, yes. And so Yoni prepares to send up a flare. Since the IC is familiar with the infrastructure, in this case, the data center, I ask a very common question, which is, don't we have a nuclear bomb? And Jason, on ground as the tech lead, says, yes, we do. And I say, you should deploy that bomb. And he does, and he provides his deploy script, which is very useful, for retros. After that has been done, I check in with Yoni on comms to say, hey, what's our status with our customer impact? And Yoni says, everything's cool. The customer data is secure. I say, we did it, everyone, and I end the incident. Now, this incident was about 8 minutes long. If it was 10 minutes, the bot would have prompted me for a status automatically if I hadn't given it one. This is actually a callback to burn down times in buildings because, again, incident command structure. But it's also just a good way to prompt the IC, like, hey, you've been heads down in this a while. Give me a status so casual observers can check in and know the pulse on the situation. A couple of other tools that we use is an internal tool called Upboard that takes all of the information from that incident, it gets piped into it, and that way at a glance we can see different incidents and customer impacts and the retros and the postmortems. If we're doing longer information to coordinate that, we use Google Docs or Quip, and then we can just put links in there. Of course, we use our own products, because if you want to provide a screenshot or a permalink to a New Relic chart to be like, there, right there, that's where it broke, that's always helpful. And perhaps one of our most important tools is blameless postmortems or blameless retros. I'm not going to go really into this. There are plenty of other good sources out there. There's a Technically Speaking podcast on it, and there's a book coming out from O'Reilly called Effective DevOps. Both go really deep into blameless cultures and blameless postmortems, but suffice to say, people are going to get along a lot better and want to fix things if you're not coming and pointing fingers at them. After all, it's the technology that broke, not the people. So all right, been doing this for a few years. What are some of the lessons we've learned along the way? Well, perhaps the most obvious one is having a single source of truth. And again, this seems obvious in retrospect, but we had training going on. That makes sense to go on to the training team. And then we had the information that got spat out by the bot, maybe have an engineer handle that. And after a while, these things kind of drifted. So things weren't what you would expect them to be. Have that all be in one place. So training documents are exactly what someone would expect to get during an incident. Again, seems silly in retrospect, but necessary to say. Another thing is that tools break. Maybe your chat system isn't as hip as you thought it was, and it experiences between 1 to 15 outages a week. Well, it's really difficult to depend on tools if they're not there. You need backups in place, a backup chat system, use a Google chat, maybe have an agreement that if a number of you are in person in a room and you've got representatives from every team, that's it and someone will take notes. You have to have a backup plan because things break. I mean, after all, that's why we have the incident command system in the first place. Software breaks. And last but not least, be willing to iterate, be willing to fail. We brought this out several years ago, and it was a rocky start, introducing a new process into an already established engineering organization. The idea of the emergency commander and having blameless retros came later. Our training sessions used to be an hour and a half long. They're now down to about 45 minutes. Always be willing to iterate, stick with it. The system does help you. Now you might be saying, like, really, it helps you? Really, is it worth it? Rolling out this stupid system? Well, recently, we had a Sev1 incident. In fact, it was a network-level event. And even though we're now a public company with engineers located not just across several floors, but across several countries, We were able to coordinate and resolve the incident in 3 hours. 3 days, 3 hours. This system works. Thank you very much. And I believe I do have time for a few questions. Don't want to hold up the room too long if anyone has them. Otherwise, you can yell at me on Twitter or just find me around here. I'm kind of recognizable. Yes?
Just real quick, have you guys open sourced the HueBot adapter you wrote for Nerd 911?
We have not. I wanted to. I wanted to be able to present this as like a here, children. But no, we haven't open sourced that. But it's CoffeeScript. It's pretty easy to figure out. Yes?
So your IC and CL roles are rotated throughout your support teams?
So that's a great question. I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. We train everyone in engineering to be an incident commander and everyone in support to be a communications lead. So whoever feels comfortable stepping up to take those roles in an incident does so, but everyone is prepped to do so.
Hi. How is the operations center? How would they fit in this workflow?
So we don't have a traditional NOC. We have a site engineering team. And I've actually found that I am part of that site engineering team, first of all. And it's easier for us to kind of dig our teeth into this and understand the operational aspect of it. We tend to come into place. The people that are going to IC are either going to be the people who are directly impacted, like their code breaks, or if it's a more widespread event, like network level or system level, then it's more likely to be someone on the site engineering team being the IC, because they're familiar with those situations. So just like devs, operations people do the role the exact same way. Anyone else?
How do you convince people that they're not crying wolf by declaring an incident too often?
How do we convince people they're not crying wolf by declaring an incident too often? We don't. We want people to point out if something's wrong, that we want to empower people. That's why we train everyone, because at least they know how to start an incident to get people's eyes on it. And I mean, if it turns out there isn't a problem, great. We go into our internal tool, we go no customer impact, doesn't impact anything, it's fine. We want people's eyes on that. We want people crying wolf, as you say. It gets them better at understanding patterns to begin with. Anyone else? Thank you very much.